Testing, testing. One, two, three.
Check, check. 1, 2. Can you hear me, Jay?
I hear you quite well, Nancy. Thank you.
chance. All right. I don't know that we really need to have anything by way of introduction, but I'll ask the staff if they'd like to. They could have an opportunity to give any kind of overview if they want. Assistant City Manager, is there anything you want to open up with before we? Oh, City Clerk.
Mayor, I was just wondering if you wanted to take public comment before we go into the work session.
I suppose I'd better. And I'll ask for any attendees to raise their hand, or if they can't raise their hand through the Zoom, let the city clerk know through some method that you'd like to speak. I see we have a phone number for a call-in listener, so I'm not always certain that they can use the hand raise deal.
Star 9 will raise their hand, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Not seeing anybody that seems to be anxious to weigh in on public comment right now. So given that, I think I'll go back to Assistant City Manager Fieser and see if there is anything he wants to share with the council by way of beginning tonight's work session. Maybe there isn't.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, thanks for giving me this opportunity. Tonight we have a work session for you on what I believe are two valuable fee-for-service agencies that we work with through the city, the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance and the Laramie Main Street Alliance. And without any further ado, I guess I would turn it over in order of which they're listed on your work session, which is the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance, and allow Brad Inzy to give his presentation.
I think that's the way to go. And thank you just for a little bit of an introduction, Assistant City Manager. I always think that's the way to go if we have someone willing to do it. These are two valuable agencies that the city of Laramie has partnered with, and I can't think of a better way to put it. See, Mr. Enzy's joined us. He's got his camera on there, and so Mr. Enzy, I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation, and then, as is traditional, after your initial part of your presentation is completed, we'll probably go into some questions and have a little bit of follow-up and conversation.
Perfect. Mr. Mayor Weaver, members of the council, I thank you once again for having the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance along to do our annual update on our fee-for-service agreement with the city of Laramie. As an organizational overview for anybody else watching, I think everybody that I see the name and certainly all the council is familiar. We are your partner and fee-for-service contractor for economic development throughout the city of Laramie, provide support through Thrive, and we also serve as a non-contracted portion. We also serve kind of as the networking and one-stop shop for entry point for business in town. By way of an overview, I sent this along to the city clerk last night. Can I screen share maybe? I don't even know how to do that. We'll see if I can get it right. Then we have the, there we go. And we'll go to, there we go. Awesome. I took last year's format, which was our first year of doing the Zoom, and hopefully this is our last year of doing the Zoom webinars, although I think they've been very effective, an effective means of running the government in times of pandemic. When we look at last year and review off of our, I don't know if I'm in control or, there we go.
Brad, give me just a second, just to help you out. I think if you want, you can ask the clerk, and she'll. Is that right, City Clerk? Or do you have the ability to cycle through the parts of the presentation for our guests?
Yeah, Brad, right now I have it sharing on my screen. If you want me to transition it to you, I certainly can.
No, it would be awesome if you would do that, City Clerk. That would be, I wasn't sure if I was in control or you were in control. So when I was hitting buttons, all kinds of amazing things were happening over here.
Brad, I'm sorry for the interruption. I just thought that might help. You can just ask the city clerk and she'll go to the next part, or we can go back and whatever we need to do. All right.
Perfect. So as an overview, every year we try to give some basic statistics of things we've been able to accomplish. So last year we created or retained 273 jobs, and that is specific to jobs that we in our partnership with the city and projects that we've created have either grown or maintained. The large part of growth in that comes from tungsten and high-vis, which continue to see robust growth, as well as the Plenty project. This year, we were also able to develop and launch a new $1 million revolving loan fund program in conjunction with the EDA. We hosted in our partnership with, which we have between the city, us, and the Business Council, hosted 8 company site visits, and we responded to 12 proposals. We also established through our partnership and administered the COVID grant and loan program, which I'll come back to in more detail. And then we continued, despite kind of the gap, working through the Thrive initiative and what steps we could take in the gap, as there weren't very few free moments for our staff last year as we helped businesses through the pandemic, but tried to continue to forward that even in advance of the update. And then we worked hand in hand with city staff and our staff to make sure that as any new information, programs, availability came up for COVID assistance or COVID information, that we used both the city and the LCBA channels to get that out to businesses and the public. Additionally, and specific to LCBA, we took the opportunity while we weren't in normal meetings to look at, does our format fit and function best for the business community of Laramie, to help with that base edict to grow the economy and the business culture. We did a bylaw review and update. We're poised to launch new committees to serve better the businesses so that they have an entry point to get a listing point, and then we can work through issues. And we hosted over 500 interactions with local businesses in one-on-one formats. We supported all the higher ed institutions as they went from no learning to some learning to hybrid learning, and now transitioning back to live learning, all of them. And we also were able to recruit a few other businesses through the processes of our own network outside of the Business Council. Next slide. I thought it important, last year we talked about what the COVID-19 pandemic was going to do to business in town. And this year I thought it an important note to look at kind of a global economic view, as well as a very local economic view of what emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic did and what the process is. So we helped a little bit. Large credit goes to our partner, Ivinson Memorial Hospital and the University of Wyoming, for getting the COVID vaccination clinics up. We just helped communicate that out and encourage people to get out and get vaccinated as a route to get back to normal quicker. We helped all local businesses navigate and seize opportunities throughout the pandemic, a COVID grant loan program. And then we really worked to establish and pivot as quick as we could between programs. We worked with LMSA in the partnered storytelling, just to have an avenue for our businesses to get word out that, hey, this is how we're operating. This is the story of our business. And Trey was a big help in getting that off the ground. She was kind of the brains, we were kind of the dough. So that was a good effort. We also did the Alliance Shopping Network, which was a short run at getting our businesses some exposure via the internet when things were very shut down. Did the Curbside Challenge and helped assist in getting the word out about the virtual tip jar to keep local service employees in the area during the pandemic and assist them through it. We also participated in committee, state, regional, and national calls and action committees on the pandemic and how its impact on business. Organizationally, to weather and maintain operation, we tightened our budgetary controls, minimizing costs and expanding services throughout the pandemic. We assessed the allocation of resources to maximize our immediate impact and look at how we can make moves to best assist the community over the long term for Laramie. We also provided one-on-one coaching to over 40 businesses for LCBA staff and logged over 400 business-specific interactions, which are different than just a reach out when I mentioned the 500. In terms of rolling to a direct partnership benefit and what ended up being a great impact and spot of entry for the city is we partnered to do the COVID-19 emergency grant loan program, which provided not only the assistance in the amount of $135,852.41 given out in grants and loans, which is divided between $31,552 in grants and $104,000 in loans for 6 businesses, which got us to 38 businesses that we directly assisted. We reached over 50 businesses that called and needed some different level of assistance and maybe had not accessed PPP or one of the state programs yet, and got them in touch there or through the Women's Business Center to get them some additional business coaching, counseling, or help. This program, which was not last year at its inception part of our agreement, logged over 345 hours of LCBA staff time. Large credit goes to Bailey Scott, who has done an excellent job of administering that and keeping the board apprised of both applications and information on the deal. Grants or loans will start to be collected in July. And a good note, we've already worked with the Chief Operating Officer of the city to make sure that the plan's in place for how those are both recapped and invoiced. So there's a plan in place that Bailey's worked out with staff at the city. Specific to LCBA, next slide, and a programmatic year in review. The first 2 things on my list here were how do we do some programmatic accomplishments. So last year we were going to start a small business roundtable and have it live. What we found over the pandemic is that the pathway to that's always been 10 to 15 businesses come in, we do a topic or presentation, they network, and everybody goes along. We did a couple of those prior to the pandemic last year, tried to continue them via Zoom, and the net effect was that people really want the human interaction, so we started serving more in a one-on-one function with those. And our lunch and learns are scheduled to start again. We actually have the Vice Admiral of Vice Admiral of the Navy, who is in charge of the Naval Academy, will be joining us on July 29th from 1:30 to 3:30 to do a presentation on leadership to local businesses and interested parties. And that's kind of our relaunch in a socially distanced format to a live event for the lunch and learn type topic. We've also continued to develop local business and community leaders. Leadership Laramie continued throughout the pandemic. They were able to find different ways to meet socially distanced and use Zoom to visit various different businesses throughout the community. The grad class that just graduated, which is our 2nd year class, established through the Wyoming Community Foundation, a nonprofit fund that continues to grow, that will in perpetuity have some money to assist nonprofits locally. This year's class has already done a Greenway cleanup project and completed that, providing more service. And then we provided more than 20 different startup consultations. So somebody said, I have a great idea for a business. They called us, we brought them in, got them to the next place for assistance, or got them the next information they need to produce it. So we have about 15 still in kind of a coaching type format where we get back with them as they're ready, but try to follow up with them every month. As I mentioned before, we had 273 jobs just in the partnership area with the city, but we were also able to get DMTI, which is a medical products company that does setup, and they're at about 10 employees. Vigilant continues to be in the area and is looking to do mass scale testing production in town for COVID as well as other medical tests in a rapid reader format. And we were able to do 350 different member meetings, which were just one that starts to classify down into businesses that were already involved with the organization, to find out issues that they were having and help them address them. In terms of what we worked on this year to do, kind of meet the 10-year specific economic development plan, the Thrive, I thought it important to note that over the last year, we had 100% staff and board participation, not only in the development of that plan, but also in ongoing discussions of how we work to implementation after update. We also had heavy involvement in the sessions with Fourth Economy as they came back to do the update, particularly in their work with the university. Attached over the next 4 slides are all the projects. Every year we're asked to give balance sheet updates, which are there for your review. When you see the snapshot time of January to 2020, it usually, if there's a net revenue loss, it has to do with taxes. And I can provide any more information in a follow-up email directly to council through Malia at any given point. All the projects that we participated in together are on track with employment curve and are on time and on cue with rent. So, and Tungsten continues to thrive. Despite having purchased out their product, they still provide us quarterly updates in employment. So those are the projects, and we can answer questions specific to those if you'd like after this. To give an idea of what happens once we cycle through a project, we can go to the next slide, and we reinvest those funds. So some of the ways that we've reinvested traditionally are the second UL building. The city has the first UL building. We built the spec building, and UL has gone into that and continued to grow their local presence. Those dollars also cycle back into programs that are issue specific, such as the COVID-19 grant loan program, business recruitment, updating the Adams Street property, the old Game and Fish, working with tourism to attract more, to really penetrate the market as people move to a more outdoor-centric tourism. And then working on business, we use those funds as part of our efforts in funding staff to do airport, as we place businesses throughout town in the airport, the county, and private buildings. And then they're also being used as we start an accelerator model to help businesses move from a saleable product to sustainability, which is what we'll do with the extra offices at the Adams Street property. Is if you've got a business that's started and you've got a product or a service that's already saleable, you'll be able to lease an office from us for 12 months, get access to the conference room and facilities at the office, and access for questions to any of our staff, be that business properties, business growth, or if you have some general bookkeeping questions, we're here to help them move and scale up their businesses. As I said, there's a grand total of just over 300 jobs, and we had, I think the biggest thing that happened last year in terms of the economy was what I call the pandemic pivot. We really went from how do we grow the workforce and how do we grow jobs to how do we maintain the jobs we have, and then the jobs that we lost, how do we make sure that the workforce was retained, which was one of the specific goals of the COVID-19 grant loan program in partnership with the city. I would say the other impacts that we have moving forward right now is because of the outflux from the coasts and kind of what I term the re-ruralization of America. Our housing market has moved from critical to crisis, and there's already a team working on it, but I would implore that the more housing we can put on the ground in Laramie, the better opportunity we have to capture the new mobile workforce and grow our opportunities locally in the economy. We've already lost 3 businesses in the last 3 months to the housing situation. 2 of them haven't unselected Laramie, but they couldn't find suitable housing as they expatriated from California to Wyoming and selected the land in Cheyenne over Laramie, even though we were their first choice for a spot to do business. We still have a chance to capture them, but housing was not only the major, but the only driver in their ability to locate in Laramie. Unsuitable housing for their executive staff. Moving forward a slide, just as a kind of a fiscal overview of the organization, we have an annual budget of approximately $1.2 million, which is up a little bit over last year. We have 4 employees full-time. We directly manage 8 economic development properties throughout the town and county. We have 6 businesses that we're in active relocation discussions with that dropped off from, I think we had 10 or 12 last year, and that was as a result of the pandemic. But we have 6 that we're in active discussions with for relocation. We spend about just under 5,000 hours a year directly in economic development. And in terms of financial oversight, as part of our fee-for-service agreement, Malia sits on our LCBA Finance Committee as a voting member, and that's codified in the fee-for-service agreement every year. Another thing that's been interesting and I think effective in terms of how we manage things is we also have another good oversight checkpoint in terms of the non-lobbying agreement, which just gives us another point to kind of clearly define roles with our board. Although challenging sometimes when we see something, we've got to figure out something that we say, oh, like housing, we've got to move now. How we engage and work with the council to solve the important and pertinent problems of the community. We also have Councilor Stalder on the board as an ex officio member, and the city manager has been gracious enough to spend not only many long hours working with me in off-channel discussions such as how do we move broadband forward or issue-specific things, but also in attendance and contribution to our meetings, most recently providing an update of how city funding works as the state budget crisis unfolded before our eyes, and how we can be an effective voice to make sure that the municipalities in the state, specifically Laramie, still have a seat at the table in terms of finance, which is a very tricky item right now. Moving forward into the next year, oops, and I didn't update the years, so the 2021-2022 would be assist in the Thrive relaunch. We're going to continue to help businesses as the higher education and tourism kind of unfolds and we see what the new market looks like. We're also working to figure out what the new kind of workspace looks like as people have learned that they don't maybe have to go to kind of the industrialized office anymore, and how we attract those workers to our community so that we can grow particularly the tech and kind of high value manufacturing community here in Laramie. We work very closely with Scott at the Albany County Tourism Board to try to capitalize on this increased focus on outdoors, did so through the winter and have plans and have already had some meetings with the Forest Service as to how we both capitalize on it and minimize impacts on the fire damaged areas for this summer's tourism. We've expanded our committees to create focused interest in, we've added basically national committees that have focused interest in the tech sector specific to artificial intelligence and data security, manufacturing specifically to the outdoor manufacturing, and then we have the aerospace sector that we continue to pursue and have some big hitters helping out on that in terms of what sectors we need and what things we need to do to be an attractive spot for aerospace companies to land and space companies. We continue to try to figure out how we expand our events and reach, which has been very tricky over last year. And we're going to start working our way back into the more traditional functions that we've had, such as business after hours, and really feel that out for where the comfort level is as people reemerge from pandemic. The big assets that will be of great value to the community next year, the $1 million revolving loan fund, which is was a 4-to-1 match by EDA, was able to get us to $1 million. It's rapidly deployable through our finance committee, which serves as kind of the board of directors for that. So there's a lot of dollars able to be used for everything from equipment to lines of credit for things like increasing your workforce so that you've got a line of credit as the revenue rolls in, typically at least 60 days behind adding an employee. We also have a keen interest, and have already met with the Business Council representative Heather Tupper on what the rollout is as we try to shape how the most recent round of aid goes to diversifying the state's economy. We continue to do business counseling and coaching, and then evaluate all the different federal programs as they come live. Back to housing, I can't reinforce enough in my role how frustrating it is when you lose something because they don't have a spot to land. It's just imperative that we start to figure out tangible ways to move that ball forward. The project timelines, just, when somebody wants to move, they want to move now. And, just between doing a grant, getting through the process, planning, zoning, any process that takes time when somebody's ready to move their business is too long for them. So some we can't work on, but how we continue to work together to shorten that timeline from the answer of yes to locating in town. All of these are exacerbated by supply chain disruptions and the commodity crunch that we're currently seeing in lumber, PVC, and copper being the three main ones, are making it a high impact on the cost of new housing. And then I think it's a great benefit for Laramie, but it's also a challenge in the workplace as people move out of a large campus style environment. What does the new model workspace look like? Because there'll still be the need to come central at some point. And what does the new workplace look like? I want to close by thanking the council and Mayor Weaver for your continued support of our economic development services. I want to thank you for the efforts that were put forward in developing, launching, and then particularly Janine's service on the COVID-19 committee, as well as Malia's continued what's the best way to do this thought process. It's been greatly benefited. To highlight that program, we went from an idea to active dollars in, I think, 90 days, which, talking to my colleagues around the state and the region, nobody else was able to make that impact that quick for their community. And there's still about 160 or 260 some odd $1,000 that could be activated, and that'll be a follow-up discussion for what do we do with the fund in the future, and how, just basically what do we do going forward as we emerge. And I think we're starting to emerge. I'm not going to be the guy who said we're done, but there are great signs of hope as the community comes back alive. And then I can't thank staff enough. Anytime we've asked for city staff to say, hey, we don't know enough about this at the board level, would you come give a presentation? It's not only yes, but it's, what else can I give you, and how else can we support making sure that the business community understands as we ask for information on different topics. So I thank you for all that support, and of course the financial support. As a note, we're set to step down another $20,000 this year to the $70,000 level with the start of the new fiscal year as part of our fee-for-service reduction plan to continue to lessen our take on city resources so they can be deployed other places. With that, I thank you, Mayor Weaver, members of the council, and stand for questions. Or sit, I guess.
It's figure of speech at this point, isn't it, Mr. Enzi? We'll get into questions. I would like to just say something right now, which is that given all the challenges that everyone in the private sector, public sector, you name it, has wrestled with over the course of the last year, I think it's worth noting that the Chamber Alliance was still able to come through with their commitment on a gradual reduction of city support. And frankly, at this point, it's not even an issue of choice. It's that resources are strapped and limited. So we just want to acknowledge that that's hard for everybody, but it's commendable that the Chamber Alliance was able to build that in, even in light of everything that's been happening for us in this country and in this community over the last year. And I think that should be noted. So I appreciate everybody giving me a minute to say that, but I think it needed to be said. I'd like to open it up to the council for questions, and then maybe if there's public attendees after council questions and comments, we might even get to a little bit of that if there are any. We've got Councilor Harrington up, and then I'll be watching for hands, folks. I've got Councilor Gabriel after that. Go ahead, Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad, I had a question, just maybe, I have a few for you, but just for my first round, where you were really involved in the, as you mentioned, in the creation of the Thrive Plan. As we sort of get back to, that sort of like the optimistic person might say back closer to normal, where should we be thinking as a council to start re-engaging on that Thrive Plan? Where do you think, from where you're sitting, what's the most important jumping off point for us?
Mayor Weaver, Councilor Harrington, housing. Housing. How do we get it in? How do we attract the developers to do it? We can't grow beyond what we already have without additional places to put people, and we're not even on a curve where we can manage the very traditional growth of the community. So if I had to pick one thing that we all said, let's get behind, I would say, let's put our resources to housing and what direction we're going to go, because it's not a simple answer. It's actually tomorrow at our board meeting, we're starting with first an overview. We do a community hot topic every month. And so in my background as a housing developer, it's always easy to say, oh, the city, or this or that, and you pick one thing and you say that's the holdup. But we're in a beautiful, pristine place that we have one of the best water sources in the country. But getting the water out of the ground, it's not like to have potable water, it's just there. So to expand, to handle extra things, there's increase in both the production side, the water side, and then in the waste side, and then there's streets, and it's a multitude of problems that are also compounded by resource availability, as well as commodity constraints and costs. And so we need to get focused and sharp and all working together on one team to say, how do we start tackling these issues in a unified way so that we can even start to meet our base needs, and then look at where we want to go as a community with that, which is that's why I said pick the housing slot on Thrive.
Yeah, council members, I'd like everybody to be able to ask a couple of questions at a time.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Then just a second, Councilor Harrington, and I say that because we only have 2 partner agencies here tonight, which gives us, I think, an opportunity to dig in a little bit. And this isn't going to be the only meeting we have with Mr. Enzi, but it's an opportunity tonight of an annual overview. So feel free to dig in a little bit. Appreciate your patience. Go ahead, Councilor Harrington. Then after you, I'll go to Councilor Gabriel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the loose format and the follow-up. So, Brad, I share your interest in all of us working together on housing. As an individual member of council, I would say that is one of my primary focuses at the moment. And I'm curious, I know we have a code audit, and my understanding is a fairly large package coming from the planning department. In the near future, sort of rolling out slowly. I'm wondering if you've been engaged with that and if there's other partners that you think need to be involved now to sort of help shape what is headed our way.
Councilor, through you, Mayor. Yes, we have at a staff level. Josh has been involved with that housing working group from its inception, and has been kind of in it and, out of it as as it worked through COVID. I think it was a little bit more difficult format for us to track, but we also engage daily. City staff just today brought a housing developer by. I was in other meetings, so wasn't able to meet with them from Salt Lake. So it's to engage. Really, when I think about Laramie, it's how do we engage beyond just Laramie? Because we can answer some of the questions here, but we need to know what those developers are looking for, what they're attuned to, what their expectations are, so that we can feed that back through and make sure we're answering the questions that need answered, and not just deciding what we think will work in an isolated bubble. Dollars will flow from outside the area, and I think that, at the start of 2020, I gave a speech as part of our yearly kickoff, and that is we have to start approaching Laramie beyond the borders, and that's in terms of where, we've lost 175,000 visits this year from football. And those are all dollars that come in, get dropped off, and people leave. So I consider those, the tax part of that is a low impact dollar. As we grow, the dollar is going to come in, get dropped off in the tangible capital assets, and then sure, maybe the developer lives somewhere else and some of that money moves out, but we still retain that tangible capital asset. So if we look at it from these are infusions, I think that's a very successful model, and I'm happy to continue to do. I love that Derek and his staff will call and say, hey, we've got somebody, and we try to get with them that day. Continue to do that. That gives us one port of entry to, we know they're here and looking. And then I reach out on a regular basis to people I know in the industry to say, what can we do? What particular things, so that we create that proper information funnel for you as the decision makers.
Great. Thank you, Brad. I really appreciate you drilling a little deeper on the housing stuff, and look forward to working on it in the future.
Okay. Councilor Gabriel, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Well, Brad, you covered my biggest question on housing, and it has to be frustrating for you and your board to lose 3 businesses because we don't have the housing necessary. And I think everybody realizes what we're going through here. I read with interest recently in the Boomerang about Saratoga and their housing crisis over there. So it's all around us, and thank you for addressing that. The one thing I guess you can talk about now that you've addressed housing, on the liaison to the tourism board, would you update the council on your recent lease agreement with the tourism board for your old location on South 3rd?
Councilor Gabriel, Mayor Weaver, members of the council, this is one of those when I guess I roughly alluded to, but to specifically drill into it, thank you for that question. When we were able to do kind of a asset and resource audit last year and say, what things do we have and what do we want to encourage and move towards? The building on South 3rd is one of the assets, and Adams Street was an asset. And I don't know if you can remember that cold in your bones when we had those few cold snaps. Josh and I found ourselves over at the Adams Street property making sure that lines were flushed, water was shut off, as heaters came back on, that they worked. And the building had been sitting vacant at Adams Street for about 3 years. At the same time, Scott had come to me and said, the tourism board had come to me and said, our location is difficult. and we're not on a main thoroughfare. We don't see, we're not seeing the hands-on traffic and getting that interaction to get them to the attractions. And the plan was hatched to get into and update the Adams Street building a little bit, provide additional services by our organization, and then to lease the old 3rd Street property to tourism. In terms of staff hours and how things work, when you come into our office and at 3rd Street, you would come in and you would see Gigi, but you'd walk by the tourism brochures, which we kept in that location to assist tourism. Our front staff would probably spend on average 7 to 8 hours a week engaged with people coming to visit, which is not, we were happy to help with, but not directly part of our call. And it's better to have Scott and his team on that main thoroughfare with the loaf and jug trapping people all the time as they come on and off the interstate and drive to find downtown and the university. It just seemed like a better way, and was one of the ways by leasing that to tourism, we're able to make that an active asset, make the Adams Street an active asset in terms of activity and having people in the building. It also gives us an opportunity to serve in a more expeditious way to businesses moving kind of from that WTBC model to where they need that next step and continue to help them grow. And I think the other thing that was very carefully considered by our board of directors was, what does it mean for us as an organization to plant a flag on the west side of Laramie? What does it mean to say, we want this to be economically viable, we want this to be a vibrant zone, we want to be part of the solution over here? And it's also where there are the Allsop property. We have another lot in the old Laramie River Business Park. We have the potential to divide this property and get Harrison Street finished with 2 more buildings on the Harrison Street side of this. And then there's a string of developable properties that are for sale or under contract, but they're certainly target properties as you approach the Snowy Range corridor. So it made sense to say, as an organization and a community, we're open for business here too, and to really open up that side of town to a commercial, a more commercial approach and destigmatization.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Brad.
You're welcome, Councilor Gabriel.
Councilor Gabriel, do you have any follow-up? Anything else? I want to make sure.
That's it. Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure you had a shot at it. It's good information. Okay, who's next? Second, Councilor Stelter.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Enzi, for your presentation. You mentioned that there were 3 businesses that were not able to locate here. Can you speculate on how many jobs, just roughly, that was?
Councilor Stelter, Mayor Weaver, there are at least 6 that are over there. I mean, and when you say that it's 6 jobs, that's just they're people coming to get started and plant a flag. These are data technologies and artificial intelligence companies that would still like to headquarter here, but that's where they could find appropriate housing to lease in the interim. That's just in the last several months. Over when blockchain started and the first round of those laws were passed, we lost 4 or 5 different startups that are probably, a grand total now of maybe 15 jobs. So you could aggregate lost those to Cheyenne in a place, that was kind of more of a dual. It was dual because they could access the state government in real time in Cheyenne. These were ones that said, we really wanted to be here, but we chose there. And it was directly because they couldn't find a spot to put their head at night.
Thank you. I have one more follow-up, if that's all right. During our city council retreat in January, we talked about having the consultants from the Fourth Economy come back and do sort of like an update to the Thrive plan regarding COVID. But listening to your presentation, it sounds like you guys are very proactive, very on top of that stuff. Do you think that that's necessary or something that would be helpful to you? to have those consultants come back again?
Mayor Weaver, Councilor Stalder, there are some big questions that are still out there regarding emergence from COVID. To say that we're going to return to a normal, I think there might be a new normal, but I think there's going to be a fundamental switch from the industrialized workplace where everybody came to the same office every day and sat their butt in the same seat, to a much more decentralized workforce, which we can take advantage of because of our access to the outdoors and recreational activities. And really, honestly, people just want to get out of cities. So there's some reimagining what that new workforce model looks like that I think there's some value in the partnership with Thrive, which might be, or with Fourth Economy, which might be even a higher level look at how we reimagine, because I don't know that we're going to have an answer in 3 months or 6 months as to what all those changes are and what the ripple effects are. There are things that we can do, and that's why to Councilor Harrington's question, I just gave a 5-time repeat on housing, is that's something we know that is tangible. If you can get to a spot now and get into a spot, people will move there. And so that we can start bridging housing, working with these technology companies, being specific at what we're recruiting to continue to fill that gap as we have that reimagined, this is what the new workforce place looks like, and create our longer term vision to meet that. With the plan being a 10-year plan, I think, you know, the immediate horizon is we can answer one thing and all work together to get to it. Then how do we start branching out into the other elements of Thrive is, you know, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and then with that ultimate vision at 10 years. So there's definitely value. I don't consult in that space or never have, so I'm not sure how I'd assign a dollar value to it though, Counselor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stalder, and thank you, Mr. Enzi. I think I heard an endorsement for expertise without a free pass to the council to spend money on outside consultants. That's a convenient spot for a partner agency to be in, but we have a different set of problems. I think I saw Councilor O'Doherty.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Enzi, for coming today. So mostly we hear that Laramie needs more affordable housing, but what I heard you say was we didn't have executive housing, which kind of surprised me because it seems like the new houses going up are all very expensive. And in my neighborhood, there's, you know, they're going up and they're for sale. So I was kind of surprised, but is that where you see the bottleneck?
Mayor Weaver, Councilor Doherty, I think I used the specific ones that we lost out on because most of these companies move, particularly privately held. The owners will move first and then build workforce and otherwise. So we lost those three specifically to the execs moving. We've lost two more in the last year because as I drive around town, the person looks at their phone and says, heck, I can barely afford to live here. When they pull up realtor.com, and this is always after lunch, I don't know why that's when people open realtor.com. They say there's no houses available and I'm not even sure I can, or here's another really important thing, I want to afford what these houses are going for. So when I talk about housing, it's every single level, from assisted base to assisted living to entry level to the next level. On excuse me, on Laramie Rants and Raves the other night, I read 3 different posts where people had offered at least over $10,000 for a house that they weren't excited to buy and got beat out. In terms of when you want to get a house, you'd like to feel like you got a deal and you have room for appreciation. That's just kind of a core human component, but ultimately you want to feel safe, secure, and sheltered in that home. So we need to make sure that every element from, you know, a person thinking about getting into entry level through somebody that owns something and maybe is making an escape from another part of the country. Escape might not be the right word, Councilor Doherty, but that's looking to move from a coast or a more highly populated area. We want to be able to meet all those niches because all those sectors build an economy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any follow up? Sounds like we're good there. Yeah. Complicated problem. I want to offer an observation about after lunch Zillow. They tell you never shop when you're hungry. So I think that might have something. Councilor Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Enzi, for coming tonight. And I was curious if internet capacity was a concern for any of the companies as they were looking at Laramie.
Mayor Weaver, Councilor Cumby, our base kind of internet is pretty doable. I think all of the companies that work in the high-speed internet are willing to extend services. I think there's been some communication gaps in terms of the availability, and somebody says, well, I called somebody and they wouldn't run it here. Typically, if you work through city staff or our office, we can get people to the right person. That said, I think with the president of the university's plans, the idea that we become a tech hub, there is no space that we as a community can't say we're engaged in moving forward because, I always use it used to be you got a Cat 5 cable and then you got a Cat 6 cable. And I don't know enough about networking or anything else, but then I went to a Cat 6E or a Cat 5E, and there's always that next thing. And we want to work as a community to always be on that cutting edge. We have some amazing resources by being on the I-80 corridor, in that there's large fiber capacity going through. How do we make Laramie be the on-ramp, off-ramp for that capacity so that we can handle large reams of data security, and artificial intelligence? So my answer would be, we have good stuff. I don't know that everybody can always get it. And if they reach out to our organization, we'll help put them in touch and close those gaps through some of our partner organizations. They're always happy to extend. And when there are problems, they always want to know about them. But I think we need to continually push where we're at and the boundaries of where we can be so that we're always on the edge and people view us as that stopping point.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Cumby. Doesn't look like we have any follow-up. Other questions for Mr. Enzi? Want to touch on this a little bit because we've sort of drilled down on this, and I really appreciate this discussion. It's one of our main policy focus areas. Brad, and I think you know that, and I think you've talked to the members of this council enough, both in meetings and in email exchanges and in other communication, that this housing issue is something we're aware of and we're concerned about. I think the way that housing continues to be a barrier to economic development here is it's really on the minds of anybody that looks at these issues. The city council, the county commissioners, the economic development partners, and all the associated many other stakeholders in that. And we've heard it from a variety of sources at this point. We've heard it from you folks, our economic development agency partners. We've heard it from housing consultants. We've heard it from staff, that the city has had to spend a great deal of time on the topic. And we've also heard it from the Wyoming Business Council, and an assessment from just a couple of years ago that this was a serious problem impacting our economic development options. And it's just so pressing. And it seems to me that from the city's perspective, we don't have a lot of tools in the toolkit. We don't have that many options to try to impact this. It's somewhat of a national problem, and I think it has regional factors here in a community like Laramie that contribute in their own special way to add to the challenge. We don't really have the ability to build housing. I mean, the city isn't going to go out and build housing. We don't build homes. We don't have a lot of impact on the price of raw materials and labor, and I personally suspect that those are driven by market pressure. We know that, but I personally suspect that it has at least something to do with the fact that we're situated by a couple of other larger markets that consume a lot of the oxygen, if you will, on that. So what I'd like to do as we talk about how to partner up and really drill down on this is focus on maybe approaches that cities similar to Laramie, Wyoming have utilized and see what we might be able to copy, because I think there's just a lot of headwinds on the housing issue for us here. So I'd like to take a look at that and really focus the discussion around those tools that Laramie does have, Laramie city government does have. I think that's the direction. That might be an obvious statement, but I think it needs to be said. I think those are the real guardrails for that discussion, because some of those things we're not going to be able to impact. But if there are areas where we can tweak things to really make Laramie more attractive or more competitive, then we need to talk about what those are. And that might speak to some of Councillor Stalder's question and the exchange that you had with Councillor Stalder about maybe we can find some folks to help us identify those things. Maybe that's worth it. Sometimes it's difficult to be, to use a shop-worn phrase, a prophet in your own land. We might think we know what those things are, but somebody else might be able to help us identify things that aren't even on our radar. I want to say that I appreciate some comments that you made too about people want to find somebody to take responsibility for the housing challenge in communities and for the housing challenge in Laramie. And I personally, for 7 years of doing this, I've come to sort of think that local government is a convenient target. This is a pretty big challenge, and it's part of a lot of complex national issues, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. So I appreciate that you mentioned that finding someone to blame is kind of a waste of time, because it's a multi-factor issue. Every time I hear a real estate professional giving a quote to a media outlet, they say the same thing. It's a national issue. There is no inventory. And now you couple that with this buying spree that I've been reading about from the last year, where the limited inventory that was available has been snapped up all over the place, particularly in the West, particularly in the states that are our neighbors: Utah, Idaho, Montana, Colorado. It's being devoured as quickly as it comes on the market. And so I think we really need to focus in on those things that we can do. And I suspect that if we work hard at that, maybe we can find some things that other communities have done that have at least taken a chip or a chunk out of the problem. And I'm not sure what that looks like. I don't know. I think if you ask citizens in the community if they wanted to sacrifice community planning standards for increased housing stock, they would have a lot of questions about what that trade-off was going to look like. And I don't know if that's even, the right question. Maybe that trade-off isn't the right way to frame it. But that's the other piece of this too, is working with the Laramie community, the existing Laramie community, who I think wants to see the community be successful and grow, but they also want to retain those things that make Laramie a good place to live. So that adds another layer of difficulty onto the problem. And I say all this just by way of communicating that I agree with everyone. This is the top issue, I think, for economic development, but it's also very tricky in terms of how we approach it. I think it's kind of tempting to say, hey, we're going to do whatever it takes to bring in housing here. But I think we'd all probably, after some reflection and a couple of deep breaths, probably say, well, we need to be careful, because there are things that make Laramie attractive that we don't want to sacrifice. Yeah, we want more housing, but we want to make sure that those trade-offs are pretty well balanced. So I just wanted to offer those couple of thoughts as something that I hear from people as well. Yep, we want housing, we want affordable housing, we want the higher end housing. It makes a community attractive to businesses, but we also want to, keep Laramie the place to live, the good place to live that it is, and it's tough. So I think we need to have further discussions and talk about how we can balance all those, and then how we can leverage Laramie's assets. I think everybody on the council feels that way. So looking forward to more discussion. Yeah, please, if you have something you want to throw in on that.
Mayor Weaver, members of the council, I think sometimes when we say, here in working on a board or a council or anything, we say, here are the resources that we have, and we start to solve problems based on what we think the problem is, based on our own context and perception. And this isn't critical of that, because that's what happens. It's human nature. We should never fight human nature, right? People don't want to see their property value go down. I fully agree with that. So we don't want to infringe on that. And I think maybe what we need to do is start asking the right questions. And that is, from an outside perspective, what are our barriers? Somebody who doesn't look at this and live it every day, but maybe a developer, maybe we reach out to some people in other communities who are living in different kinds of housing, because it's not a one-shot deal. I think in the LMSA district, Trey hears a lot that people would like to see, a higher density model. I think there's a want for that. I know that there's, you can talk about the executive end that we talked about with Councilor O'Doherty, but we still need everything in between, maybe a very dense model and a very high-end model. We need that whole gamut. And so to reach out to some people who would tell us what the market driver would be, the people who would want to live there, why they would want to live there, what they're looking for, and then from a development perspective, maybe we reach out to some larger national developers, some other regional developers, and say, what do you really see the barriers to be generally when you go to a town? And if you evaluated Laramie, what would they be? And I can tell you some of those are land availability. You have to have land that's available and adjacent to resources and adjacent and available to be annexed if you want to be a city development. So you have to have the availability of that land, and then once you have a land that you can say, okay, there's the spot on the map, you have to have the person that owns that spot on the map willing to sell it at a price that supports your development. So there's some very fundamental things that don't have anything to do with, with the council and the city. We can start to aggregate that information back so that you can solve the right problems and answer the right challenges with efficient use of your time. And so I think that's really is, are we asking the right question, and are we asking it to the right people? How do we get that information back and then synthesize it for a Laramie specific solution?
Brad, I want to thank you for engaging with that. It makes me feel a little less self-conscious about that monologue there, because, and I appreciate your thoughts on that, because I think that's how we need to start shaping this conversation. So I appreciate your input on that. And I agree with everything you said. It doesn't make it sound any easier, but at least it's starting to give some shape to an approach we could take. So, like I say, I appreciate you engaging with me on that. Councilor Cumby.
I have one more question. I just looked up the cost of housing and availability housing between Laramie and Cheyenne actually runs about 4.6% higher than our cost of housing, and our availability is about the same. I'm just wondering if the availability, if you think the availability of shopping, where you have more of a selection of stores and things available, if that's a significant influence.
Mayor Weaver, Councilor Cumby, I think people being happy in the community they're in is the biggest influencer of whether they're happy. everybody has a different driver. And I think when you look at kind of that data, it tends to be trailing. Cheyenne at any given point, their normal market saturation, they usually have about somewhere north of 120 homes on the market that you could pull up in like a realtor.com. That's the number that the realtors over there give me. They're constrained well below 100. I think when I talked to my friend Terry, who's a realtor over there last Friday night, just kind of trying to feel and gauge that out. So there's to the point of, it looks like we're similar and we're behind. We're a little bit below them in pricing. The tough thing on housing is it's always, it trails 6 months or a year as that data gets aggregated effectively. We know for certain that we're in a market pinch right now. We need to start casting that net a little bit further out, because if we try to answer last year's data, we can go back to 2017's data and we were 750 units or whatever the W Business Council's report kind of gave us as a starting point in 2017, when the council, which predates both of us, but when the council started addressing this with the housing task force. We know that if we were 750 short then and there were X amount of houses on the market, that it's a lot tighter problem today. And we know that our demand has gone up by people wanting to move to the area. So I think then to the kind of retail component, I do think some elements pick to be places because of their access to retail, or a big one that we hear a lot when you look at the state and how they look at economic development. They always say access to the airport. Well, which, people go, oh, well, in Cheyenne, well, I did a simple flight study about 2 months ago because I had 15 free minutes, and I thought, I used to fly to Washington, D.C. to see my folks. And I always look at places where you can go from, what do I have to do if I wanted to get somewhere and get back in a business meeting context? When I started flying more for work and had kids, I wanted to get home. And so I said, where could you get to in Laramie and get home at night? And you can actually, if you leave on our very earliest flight, and you could fly and do a meeting anywhere on the East Coast, and you've got to hit everything right. I mean, we're not talking about extra time. You can get your butt back in your own bed here in Laramie in one day. That's incredible. For a local regional airport, that's unheard of. In Cheyenne, when I lived there, I barely knew if I could get on, if I went into the security gate, if the plane would actually leave. And that's no knock. Cheyenne's done a lot on their air service, but we're way better. That's something, and with the new terminal, it's such an asset to the community. My aunt actually got diverted here a few weeks ago, and they took them off the plane to use our facilities because it was a secure place. There was a thunderstorm diversion at Denver, and she could not stop ranting and raving about the new terminal. So it's an asset. So people will look at these different things. Can I get on a plane? Can I go to a Target? Can I, how long does it take me to do X, Y, or Z? And the way that we influence the retail availability is going to be the number of people we have living in our community, because that's the driver that every single one of those says, we don't come to a town under 50 or under 40 or whatever. Our economic snapshot area has to be, they're using a matrix to make their business decisions. So in order for us to increase, maybe those, kind of big brand, big box retail alternatives, we've got to answer the housing question.
Councilor Cumby.
Thank you. That's all.
All right, I appreciate that. I appreciate that element of the discussion too, because that one always comes up as well, sort of the Target Olive Garden factor. I always kind of wonder, just to pick a couple, I always kind of wonder too if Cheyenne is somehow at a little bit of an advantage over us because it's easy for people to get down to a larger metro area, with a lot of convenience, and then they can get back home to Cheyenne without a lot of trouble. So it's no big deal to dip down to the city, whereas it's a little bit more of a trip from Laramie. And if that if that's a factor that drives some of their growth success over Laramie, I don't know. I suspect that it could be, but I don't know that that's insurmountable. Any other questions for Mr. Enzi from the chamber? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Enzi, I just wanted to acknowledge that I think this accelerator idea that you have going on at the Adams Street property is a really pretty exciting one. I think that might be a notable missing piece in our sort of business development from a grow your own sort of a situation. I think that might really meet a need. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before we move on. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Harrington, thanks. We already have one roofing contractor from Cheyenne that's trying to do an expansion to the market, and this is a safe way to do it. And then we're going to have a community partner nonprofit that's actually working on making sure that as the COVID situation impacted people's ability to pay rent through a grant with the county, they'll be able to counsel people for 3 offices. And we decided that was a good fit because it keeps workforce in place. I think once people get to the wind right now, it's going to be very difficult to reattract them, particularly with the housing situation. If they say, I'm out of Laramie, we probably don't get them back. Particularly in the more entry level and service oriented jobs. If we lose them, they're not going to come back, and we need them.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. Other council questions before I would give the public a crack at it? All right. I want to say one last thing, which is just that this is always a really interesting discussion about economic development and all the different approaches. If there's one thing I can say with certainty about as an individual member of the council, it's that I am not dedicated to one particular approach. I don't have one particular approach in my mind that I think the council needs to take. I think we need to be as flexible as we can and look at different things we might do and look at what's been. I really said that we don't have predetermined notions about how to be more successful economic. For me, that seems like the right approach right now. I think we have the potential, and we have had potential for a while. It's just kind of waiting for the right things to come together and also try to be proactive where we can. I'm really open to trying some things. Maybe this particular era will be a good time to try new things. If council's all right with it, I think I'd like to see if any of the attendees want to ask a question or weigh in here. I don't see any hands up, but I'll give folks a case. I'm not seeing anything. I'll check with the city clerk and see if she's had anybody check in with her.
Honorable Mayor, your city clerk is now he, and I haven't had any contact here.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Assistant City Manager. I didn't see any hands up from attendees. One shot at anything that came to mind here for Brad Enzi before we turn him loose? Because it's pretty interesting discussion, and it involves a lot of things that I don't necessarily have a lot of expertise at all about, but I'm interested in it, and I want to try to make good policy choices. So it's always kind of fun to dig in. So I appreciate your willingness to engage with all those questions, and I appreciate these questions for Mr. Enzi. Much. Well, I think we'll move on to the second portion of the work session. And
Mayor, as I move Trey to be able to present, I'm going to ask her, Trey, would you like to drive your own presentation, or would you like me to drive the presentation for you?
Todd. I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Would you like me to drive the presentation for you? Would you like me to have you have co-host and screen share capabilities?
I would love it and be honored if you would click through for me.
Okay, absolutely. I will do that. As soon as I get it up, you'll be prepared to go.
Thanks.
Welcome, Trey Sherwood, person of many, many hats. We're glad to have you here. We'd like to hear some updates about the Laramie Main Street Alliance, so it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. But I also just want to reflect too on that amazing conversation and presentation with Brad and the chamber. Just kudos to he and his staff for all the work that they did through COVID. It was a crazy year, and to see everybody double down in support for our business community was really inspiring. But I would also just echo what he said about housing. I am seeing it as well, and whatever you need from me as an individual or as part of Main Street to be at the table for these conversations about workforce housing, I am game.
You know what I'd say to that is thank you, and I think we need all hands on deck for creativity, imagination, and ideas. That's what it's really coming through to me is that's the kind of mode we need to be in, open and willing to try different things and look at different things and see what might be a good fit for Laramie. But I appreciate that comment.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for this time to give you an update about what we were able to accomplish in 2020 with your support and assistance. So next slide, please. Thank you, Todd. So just as an overview, so Laramie Main Street uses the National Main Street model, a 4-point approach for economic development. And we've been doing this since 2005. So last year was our 15-year anniversary. Didn't really get to celebrate in any traditional fashion, but we're going to do a little bit of a reboot this year and keep that good energy going. So as an overview, we have 3 staff members, 2 are full-time, 1 is part-time. We have a very active board of directors and 4 specialized task force or committees that focus on a holistic strategy for economic development. So since 2005, we've provided our services free to anyone in the 28 block commercial district. So that could be a business, a building owner, somebody who resides downtown or works downtown. Regardless of that, if you are part of the downtown family, you get our support. So at last count, we had over 3,500 people working downtown, 290 locally owned businesses in the district, and we're sitting steady at that 95 units in terms of residential housing, which we know that there's a demand for more. So our work, oh no, Todd, that was perfect, thank you. So our work focuses on these 4 areas. So we have a design task force that is looking at anything aesthetic downtown. So that could be historic preservation and design, public art, the way our bike racks look, the way our signage looks. It's really meant to make sure that people, our consumers, feel comfortable, safe, and engaged while they're downtown, and that they have a pleasant experience so that they continue to stroll and visit businesses and spend money and come back time and time again. We also think that this design element is reflective of our community character. So we want for a visitor who comes into town to get a sense of place and a sense of what our community values through what they see during their sidewalk stroll. And then our economic vitality team, also known as our Downtown Development Authority or DDA, really focuses on that direct business contact. So whether somebody is getting ready to open a business and needs help with lease negotiation, finishing up a business plan, or they're in a growth phase and they need help scaling up, or they're ready to retire and sell. We customize our services based on the business's need, but we don't have to be experts in everything. We have an amazing network of economic development partners here in the community. So sometimes it's doing that very personalized handoff to somebody at the university or the chamber or the Women's Business Center. So it's our job to understand the business needs and connect them with the resources that they desire to be successful. And then our promotions team, which most people are familiar with, any historic district, we want repeat visitors. So we host seasonal events. And in 2020, we were able to do the farmers market, but really not a lot of our other activities. So we're happy to be gearing back up again. So we did increase the number of marketing campaigns to get people engaged with businesses. And I'll talk about those a little bit later in the slides. And then I would say our human resources arm, our org committee, really is looking at, do we have the financial resources we need to be successful? Are we engaging our community as volunteers at that grassroots level? And do we have enough volunteers to staff all of our teams and our activities? So that's the 4-point approach, and any Main Street community that's certified uses that model.
Mayor, could somebody remind us how to make the current slide fill the screen? Because I can't remember, and I think Todd was looking for that too. Is it up on the upper right, above where it says downtown payroll grant? The little somebody who's a PowerPoint person, could you help us out?
I wonder if it's that icon that you were just hovering over that looks like a little screen. I wonder if that's the one that might expand it at the bottom of the current slide. Trey, sorry, thanks for bearing with us here. 2 over from that one that looks like a little screen on the stand.
He tried that one, I think.
Oh, okay. Maybe, yeah.
Is it on the upper right? The little tiny thing that one? Nope. I'll check while we're doing this.
I do have a message into Nancy to see if she can tell me how to do it. Okay.
Thank you, Todd.
All right.
And yeah, thanks for bearing with us here. If we can just go ahead and go on to the next slide. I wanted to do an overview of some of our COVID recovery strategies. There you go. Thank you. So at the end of 2020, seeing that businesses were still in transition, we were able to partner with United Way, who is just a phenomenal agency here in our community doing such amazing work, to take some of their funds and match them with community gifts from both individuals and other businesses. We were able to raise over $50,000 and get out payroll grants to 37 businesses in the downtown. 21 of those were restaurants, 11 were retail, and 5 were service providers. And they used those funds to support a total of 118 full-time positions and 328 part-time positions at the end of the year. And so that was just a really beautiful collaborative partnership that helped some of our businesses get through a tough time there at the end of 2020. Next slide, please. We were also able to increase the number of downtown gift certificates that were sold and then generated and spent in local businesses. So this is about double the amount that we saw purchased in 2019. So with the support of a marketing campaign, a partnership with Hits 106 that developed an online platform for us to be able to sell these, and in communication with First Interstate Bank, who kept their drive-through as an option to buy gift certificates, we were able to put, again, over 30,000 back into local businesses in 2020. Next slide, please. And then this was a really fun partnership with the University of Wyoming that they invested $80,000 into our Cowboy Cash program. So these were $10 gift certificates that were handed out to students living on campus last year. They each received $50 to spend locally before they went home at the end of the semester. We saw approximately 40,000 of those redeemed and are about to reissue the remaining 40,000 this summer. That will be available to any faculty, staff, or student at the University of Wyoming, and those will be able to be picked up at our farmers market starting on June 25th. So just another push to get money into our local businesses, but also to engage the university in the process. Next slide, please. And then as businesses pivoted to e-commerce, We saw both the need to support online retail within this shop local narrative and help businesses who were interested in selling find appropriate platforms. So whether that was Etsy or Facebook or the creation of their own website. So the Wyoming Women's Business Center offered phenomenal training webinars on e-commerce. And then as our businesses scaled up, we were able to create these virtual shopping guides to help connect our consumers and say like, hey, you can be shopping from home in your pajamas and still support your local businesses through this resource. So we did 2 editions of this, one in the spring and then one for Small Business Saturday. Next slide, please. And then all of you, I think, are familiar with our very creative placemaking projects that we did in coordination with the City of Laramie. Thank you for your support of these projects, and Todd for your time and energy. We know that they were big lifts, but they also made a really big difference in our community. So this was adding additional seating to the First Street Plaza, creating the Hollyhock Commons out at 2nd and Custer, the open container, which is coming back. And I've had so many people reach out just thanking me for that opportunity to continue to utilize this sort of casual stroll experience to hang out with friends downtown. We were able to partner to make it easier to use the right-of-way for sidewalk sales and outdoor seating, and you continue to see that outdoor dining element of our district growing. We were able to do additional flowers, some really beautiful Edison lights over the First Street Plaza to add some ambiance to that space, and then purchased and hung additional holiday lights to the light poles and the historic train just to make the space our public space more inviting during the winter months. So next slide, please. And we continue to host marketing campaigns to support recovery. And so in 2020, we did 10 individualized support local marketing campaigns. And this was anything from the gift card challenge, those virtual shopping guides, to a Shop Smart, Shop Safe program, and Small Business Week. And then currently we're running this Takeout Tuesday, inviting our community to, support a local restaurant for breakfast, lunch, or dinner on Tuesdays as we continue to see our restaurants recover. Next slide, please. And then in partnership with the Tourism Board, we were able to co-brand a Shop Laramie program that we launched with Small Business Week. And we're going to continue to use these materials throughout the year. So anytime there's a special event, whether it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, this 307 day, we're going to continue to come back to this Shop Local narrative and remind our community about why it's so important to support our local mom and pops that then support their neighbor as well, and just really keep our dollars and recycling within the community. Next slide, please. And then it's been wonderful to partner with National Main Street and with Wyoming Main Street and the Business Council to host recovery workshops. So this is anything from the economics of historic preservation and providing assistance to property owners and businesses who bought their buildings in recent years and helping them make improvements and understand the economics of that investment, to a happening this week, a Make Wyoming series for our boutique manufacturers, our craft people, our artisans that are making their own products and helping them scale up. So it's anything from understanding those supply chain issues to e-commerce to exporting best practices. And the National Main Street Conference has been hosting a series of free sessions for businesses just in how to access resources to continue to recover and grow after the pandemic. Next slide, please. Thank you, Todd. And then similar to what Brad mentioned, it's our job to understand what resources are out there. So whether that's the federal level, state level, or local level, and make sure that we're being a repository for those resources and sending them out in our newsletters, through our social media, and then through our face-to-face visits and coaching sessions with businesses, letting them know that there's customized resources available for them depending on their industry type or size, and helping to make sure that we can support them in applications, letters of support through grants, or sitting down and editing materials so that they have a good shot of applying for and receiving these recovery funds. Next slide, please. So now I'll get into more of the traditional 2020 in review. But we know that the COVID recovery and the pandemic, is going to be forever tied to how we focus our work moving forward in terms of doubling down in support of our small businesses. So next slide, please. Thank you. So again, going back to this 4-point approach, I just wanted to highlight projects in each of these areas that we're super proud about. Starting on the right side there, our organization in the end of 2019, we were approached by Brookings Institute that wanted to do a case study about our work and do a look back over that 15-year period and what that meant for place-based revitalization of the district. And so that work and those interviews happened pre-COVID. And so then the case study shifted gears a little bit in 2020 to look at communities that had vibrant place-based economic development programs in place, like Main Streets, tended to do better through the pandemic and then are set up for resiliency moving forward. So that data came out and was published in February. And then we were part of a panel discussion on with National Main Street and sharing out that report to our peers. And if you haven't seen it, I'm happy to send you the links. There's some key areas of focus in terms of sort of best practices that were gleaned from that data. And as I mentioned earlier, even though we were in the middle of the pandemic, we were still able to safely host the farmers market, which was great in terms of supporting our ag and creative entrepreneurs that they use the market as a way to bring income in and feed their families. And so the idea of canceling that, we knew would have a negative ripple effect through the economy. So not just for like the socialization aspect or fresh access to food, but it was supporting those vendors as entrepreneurs through the pandemic was really important to us. And we were able to pivot and offer events in a virtual platform. So Pop-Up Art Walk was both in person and virtual and went from a weekend to a week so we could spread out the audience. And so we were able to do that and continue to support our creative economy, which was also important to us. And then I mentioned the Hollyhock Commons being something that we're super proud about. Anytime you do placemaking or parklet, there's people who are going to love it and people who are uncomfortable with it. But I think it was a good social experience to get our community used to using public space in a new way. And then thinking about the economic vitality side, which really is my favorite part of the job, is that one-on-one business engagement. We were really able to double down on our support for local businesses, hone our resources, our tools, do some deep listening to understand what our businesses need and customize our services for what was needed in 2020. So just some highlights of things that we're excited about and proud about. And if you have questions about anything else on the slide, I'm happy to come back to it. So next, please. So we tracked 300 individual business support sessions. And what that means is anytime we had a business reach out to us and say, hey, I'm struggling, whether it was with QuickBooks or hiring or lease negotiation, whatever it might be. And we took the time to sit down with them, whether in person or Zoom or over the phone. We logged those monthly. And then we're able to look back and understand which businesses we were able to assist in a very personalized and meaningful way. We also hosted 15 online networking, listening sessions and trainings. I mentioned, we're not going to say we're really good at this and do it. I think Brad alluded to this. It's like our job to understand what the need is and then put the resources together. So these listening sessions really helped us understand where businesses were struggling, what they needed from us or one of our partners, and then customize those tools to help them be successful. And then because, again, we're not experts in everything, we do partner with the Business Council or the Wyoming Women's Business Center or even the incubator on campus to cross-promote or co-host additional training sessions for businesses in our community. Next slide, please. So we were able to assist 10 net new businesses in opening during the pandemic, which was a lovely surprise to us because I think as things started getting worse, we thought, all right, everybody's going to go on pause. But we did see some people say, I've wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've wanted to do this. I've had hours cut back in my regular job. I'm going to go ahead and pivot and switch gears. And so it was really exciting to see that people had this sense of hope of chasing their dream and opening their business even during this really difficult period. And then all total, those 10 businesses created 49 net new jobs. So that was, a great boost to our local ecosystem downtown. And then, as I mentioned, the importance of hosting the farmers market. So that included 67 ag and craft entrepreneurs that we really want to be able to coach and support and put into our pipeline so that some of these, as they grow, can become new businesses downtown or within the community when they're ready to have a storefront. And then through the pop-up art walk, we supported 20 local artists as entrepreneurs and being able to get their products in front of consumers and make sales as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then in terms of our communication and outreach, our marketing coordinator, Jennifer Power, is phenomenal. And so we increased the amount of electronic newsletters we were sending out and started to customize those for both businesses and the community. So how the community could stay safe while still supporting local, and for businesses, as there were resources being rolled out, how they could access those resources. And then there were 196 individual social media pushes to support a shop local narrative and keep that at front of mind as we were tempted to order everything on Amazon. And then it was sort of a fun statistic to be able to look and see how was the consumer engaging with us with this shop local narrative. And you'll see that there were photos and stories from individuals, over 1,000 of those, capturing this shop Laramie hashtag, engaging with these campaigns. Next slide, please. All right, so a lot of data on the page. So we always track our return on investment. We do monthly reports to the Business Council and then compile those annually to share with you and our partners. And this slide, I did a comparison. So 2020 is on my left, and then 2019 is sort of there in the center, just so you could see. I thought what was going to happen is all of our numbers were going to go down because it was so challenging, but you'll see that wasn't really the case. So we had more renovation projects, meaning there were more private investments into our downtown infrastructure, into individual buildings, although at a smaller dollar amount, but people were still making improvements, which is really inspiring to see. Again, that 10 net new businesses in 2019, we had 15. So we're not so far off from what was normal in 2019. We had actually more net new jobs created in 2020 than in 2019. So yay, entrepreneurs growing local. But we did see a dramatic decrease in our volunteer hours. This was down by about a third. And so this is a reflection of some of our projects being put on pause and then trying to figure out how to engage people virtually without being in person for meetings and projects. So I'm hoping when we come back to you guys next year and report out on 21 that we're over this, that we're closer to these 4,000 hours that is normal for us. And then you'll see our number of civic engagements. So this is something new that the Business Council has asked us to start tracking. So this is the number of times that either a staff person or a board goes out and presents to an organization, is an active partner at the table in a critical project. For me, a lot of these numbers come from my time spent with the emergency task force that the county was organizing. So this is something we'll start reporting out on in terms of how many times did we sit at the table and help build something bigger than ourselves. And we're part of a narrative beyond just Main Street. So next slide, please. And then you'll see this is our 15-year data. So almost 28 million invested since 2005 downtown, and that's from private and public sources. So, you know, slow and steady is the economic development race that we run. And so it's nice to look back over this period of time and see the overall impact that the program has had, that the city's investment has had, and individual businesses have made in the district. And so, you know, it's amazing to see that 153 net new businesses and almost 650 net new jobs created, again, by those small mom and pops, usually like one job at a time. So that all starts to add up. Next slide, please. So look back. So last time I was here about a year ago, we were switching out our fiscal year. So historically, we went from July to June. we made a decision as the board recently to do a traditional calendar year and switch from January to December. So our operational budget, it was a 6-month transitional budget, which actually worked out beautifully to do that during COVID because we were very cautious about our revenue and expenses, and you'll see that reflected here. So this is a 6-month snapshot, but I'll also show you our 2021 for 12 months as well. So you'll see that this is just essentially like half, if you take everything, well, no, not everything, and times it by 2, university is one gift. So a lot of our budget is front loaded during this July to December time period. But you'll see that what we had budgeted for our public donation campaign and for the farmers market was very conservative, and that those events made significantly more money than we had anticipated. So to have that padding during COVID was amazing, but you'll see how we're having to reuse it as carryover now in 2021. So next slide, please. So this is, again, a snapshot of 6 months worth of our expenses there. You see my salary for the half of the year, the staff, payroll, rent is super affordable. We have an amazing landlord. And we were very cautious and scaled back a little bit on our marketing and training budgets so that we could come in under expenses. And then again, didn't know that we were going to have to, but have now rolled that difference between our income and expenses into 2021, which is the next slide here. So you'll see that the City of Laramie's contribution is 29% of our budget there at that $50,000, which is much appreciated. The University of Wyoming continues to be a sponsor or to gift us funds from the president's office each year. We're hopeful that we'll have in-person training, and so are utilizing this grant from Wyoming Main Street to cover staff, board, or volunteer training. We continue to have a great partner in the Local Initiative Support Corporation for a capacity building grant. And then our goal for public donations and fundraisers from our events, you'll see there, is more in line with our historic averages. And then the rent that we receive from the Empress that we're allowed to apply to our operational budget isn't much, but it still helps. And then you'll see there the little note on carryover from 2020 where we were short in developing a balanced budget. So we're carrying those funds forward. Next slide, please. So there you go. So then you see the payroll all lumped together. That number looks impressive when it's not broken out. Same thing though, like I'm full-time, our program manager who does our events and volunteer coordination is full-time, and then our marketing person is part-time. And then we contract with an accountant and legal aid to do things like bookkeeping and our taxes for us. Again, rent is very reasonable. General overhead administration and direct business services in forms of grants or resources. And again, that training budget back in there, really trying to scale up again on marketing, seeing that we had such success from those Shop Local campaigns. And then you'll see also in there, which is somewhat a new item, our new building, the WYO Theater. Even though it was a wonderful donation and we very much appreciate it, it still costs money to keep it insured and to pay the property tax on that building. So you will see our budget there is balanced. And then a snapshot of, yes, Todd, thank you. That was right there, restricted funds. So there are times when we apply for grants, we earmark funds from our events, and now utilizing an endowment, which has just been such a blessing, to build out funds for our physical improvement projects. So that includes, we have funds still earmarked for those 3rd Street medians in 2025. For our wayfinding signage, we're doing that in phases. For our parklet or placemaking grant to add additional seating to the downtown. To keep investing in our public art and our bike rack infrastructure. So you'll see anything that's in italics is projected or earmarked. So a lot of those are reimbursable grants that we spend first and then get those money back. But the numbers that are in regular font, they're sitting in the bank earning interest, which is great. And next slide, please. All right, we're almost done here. So looking forward, every year we go through and do our priority projects, and we have a very systematic way to sort of vote on where we're going to spend our time and money. We decided as an organization just to revisit what we found important in 2020. So this doesn't look that much different from last year, just kind of an updated, refreshed look to some of these projects. But for me, it's really important for us to be an asset and a voice at the table and an advocate for our businesses and preparing for economic recovery. So making sure we're tracking conversations about American Rescue Plan funds and how those are going to be utilized at local levels, understanding how to continue to improve upon our business support services, and making sure we're at the table to re-engage with the Thrive Laramie plan, as Brad mentioned, and as that energy starts building again around this economic development strategy. We also want to make sure we're being good stewards of the buildings that we own. So that means finishing out those apartments at the Empress, understanding what direction we're going to take with the Wild Theater, and then being at the table anytime there's conversation about underutilized space or those problem buildings that just need an additional partner at the table to move forward. We continue to work on our wayfinding signage, which, man, aren't we stubborn here? And Todd and Derek have been phenomenal partners at the table for this one. We thought we had the funding for it in March 2020, fully funded, and the Business Council pivoted and said, we need to spend our funds on business recovery, and rightly so. And so now we're piecemealing the project and doing it in phases. So you'll start to see some signs go up, I believe, the early fall. As we raise money, we'll have signs made. And so instead of it being an all at the same time big reveal, wouldn't that be lovely? It's slow and steady is going to win the race on this project. We want to continue to invest in improvements to our public space and then make sure our foundation is strong. And so we're going back to our basics to evaluate our fundraising strategies and how we show appreciation and value towards our volunteers. So these will be our key areas of focus this year. And last slide. I would invite you all to come hang out with us Thursday at the train depot. If the weather's nice, we'll be outside. Otherwise, we'll be in the building, but we'll have the doors open for airflow. We're going to spread out. This is a way for us to introduce to the community our new farmers market staff, which I'm super excited about. We are also able to partner with the university to get some new interns. So we want for them to meet our businesses and our board members. And just to kind of, again, we didn't get to do much for our 15-year anniversary. So we want to sort of stop and reflect on a lot of the data that I shared with you tonight, celebrate, and then decide how, as a community, we're going to move on and continue to revitalize our downtown. So I will stand for questions. And again, I appreciate your attentiveness and all of your support over the years. It has helped us to be successful.
Great presentation. Thank you very much for that. And that's on our agenda center, and I think that might be a useful thing for people that want to learn more about Main Street and what they're doing and how they do it. So that's going to be available through that link there, and I think we should take a little bit of our time and effort to make sure that that's available and get that out there, because it's very informative and it's easy to follow, and it wasn't too long. Thank you very much. We did appreciate it. And I know there's probably some questions. I saw some hands up. Councilor O'Doherty, you're first, and then I'll keep my eyes out for hands up.
Director Sherwood, thank you for the presentation. It was very easy to follow. But I had a question about how many businesses you serve. Like, I saw there were 300 visits, but can you estimate, like, how many people are on your mailing list and that kind of thing? Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Councilor, for that question. So we're not a membership-based organization. We are a geographic service-based organization. So anybody who is in the historic downtown or that commercial core receives our services for free. So at last inventory, we had 290 businesses. They get our services. I don't have on the top of my head how many property owners, but I should probably look that up. If they need us, we're available. And then same thing, if there's an employee or a resident downtown that has questions, they want to get involved, they want, help circulating their resume, we're also there for them as well. So those 290 businesses obviously were a big part of our focus last year. And I'm happy to report we didn't lose anyone, which was amazing. And again, gained 10, which is just a testimony to our community and our consumers' willingness to support local through the pandemic. So thank you, community members. So that 290 businesses, we try in theory to touch everyone, whether that's they're getting our business newsletter, they're engaged with us. We have a private channel for business owners downtown that can do some peer-to-peer networking on Facebook. And then obviously during the pandemic, it was harder to do site visits, but when it became safe again, we started to do that. So those 300 individual business sessions were either one-on-one time with myself or another staff member on the phone, virtually on Zoom, or face-to-face, and just troubleshooting whatever they needed, whatever the issue was, we were there to spend time with them.
Do you know about how big your mailing list is? And do you have a way of tracking if people are seeing the emails?
Yeah, so I will have to look up the subscriber number for you. That's also something I used to have top of mind. And we can see the open rate, which I know our marketing director shared with me last week is higher than industry standard, which is lovely to see. And we can go in and see who has opened the newsletter and clicked through, or whose email address bounced back that we need to get an updated one for. But I can look at that readership number for you and get back to you.
Just wondering roughly. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a follow-up to that, if folks will let me. And it's in that same vein. Of those 290 businesses, Director Sherwood, do you have a way of tracking, how many contacts and how often you're working with those individual businesses? And of that 290, how many of those you sort of have repeat engagements with over time?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mr. Mayor, which is now a really funny TV show. Yes, we do track that. So we call it level of engagement. And it's something that actually we've worked with Wyoming Main Street to create a system for. And so we have a business database. And then I refer back to my calendar, which I make scrupulous notes on, and plug those things in together. So we can see that on average, the last few years that we've been tracking this, about a third of our businesses are what we would call highly engaged, that they come back repeatedly for services and are very open about where they're struggling. And that's hard. That is so hard here in Wyoming when we are this pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We're told that you've got to be independent and do it yourself. It's hard to ask for help. So to have a third of our businesses that are comfortable reaching out feels really good. Obviously, we'd like more too. Please don't suffer in silence. Again, we're here for you for free. And then another third of that, sort of in the middle, is what I would call passively engaged, where if I go in and visit with them, they may open up and say something, but they don't initiate that request for assistance. Or if we go in and say, would you like to be part of the small business campaign or Small Business Saturday campaign? They're like, yeah, but they won't call us to remind us that they want to do that. And then another third, I would say, are either unaware of our services, which stinks, and that's totally on us, or just, are lovely and stubborn and doing fine on their own and don't feel like they need any assistance. So, and that's sort of been the breakdown the last few years, really ever since we started tracking it this way, is a third, a third, a third.
I really appreciate that. So I think my takeaway from that is 2/3 of the businesses out of that figure that you gave us are regular, intermittent, or in regular or intermittent contact with you about downtown events or programs that you're doing, or technical assistance that you're offering, or grant assistance that you're offering. And I think that's important because, when we're talking about community resources, sometimes we'll be asked questions about, well, what services are actually being provided, and what percentage or what figure of businesses are utilizing these programs. So that's really good information for us to hear. Thanks, Council, for letting me get a question in there. Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. Trey, thank you for a very thorough presentation. Always appreciated. I'm curious. I can't remember, but I'm always impressed with the Ludwig renovation at 3rd and Ivinson. Every time I go downtown, I know that was an extensive renovation. And I was just curious, could you remind me how that came about? Grant money and then private money and so on?
Yes, happy to, Mayor and members of council. And this is a great illustration of really any property owner who wants to come to us and make improvements within that historic preservation realm. And so we partner with the Wyoming Main Street Program and the Alliance for Historic Wyoming to offer what's called a historic assistance grant. So this is to take all of the guesswork out of what is original on my building, what can I save, what can I bring back, and how much is it going to cost me? So I don't remember what year it was, but if you think of it as pre-development work, we were able to partner with Evan and Ann to do that historic preservation grant to take away the unknowns of, was the original brick still there? Were the window openings still there? And what was the condition of the building under that slip cover? So once they had what I like to call a roadmap, so an architect and engineer coming out and saying, yes, you can take it off, the building will be stable. Yes, you'll take this off, the brickworks need repaired. Then they were able to assess their finances and understand sort of, again, that return on investment in terms of whether they had cash on hand to do the project, whether it was something they wanted to finance or go after additional facade grant resources. And so my understanding is, at least with the Ludwig example, they took about 3 years to save funds before they did the project. But we are working with a handful of new property owners downtown, instances where the business was able to buy the building, which is super exciting. And we are assisting with another round of facade grant applications through the National Park Service and National Main Street to bring some of those resources to our property owners.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Other questions for the Main Street Director, folks? Okay. Well, I'm going to toss in a comment also about, I think a lot of the Main Street work is evident just through a quick survey of downtown. We just talked about an example. You mentioned the acquisition of the Wyoming Theater building and the ongoing efforts with that. The Big Hollow Co-op building on the former empty lot that was empty for quite some time, and other examples. And I'm sure there's going to be some future examples of that as well. So it's really good to get this overview of information. Council members, how about some questions for the Main Street Director? The presentation was so complete, nobody has any. Thank you, Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Trey. That was a very good presentation. And I just have a question regarding the open containers or that we approved to go into effect again this year. And during our discussions toward the approval of that, we had talked about possibly having cups that were probably be branded, with the Downtown Laramie logo, City Council logo, whatever, that would be something like what they have at the UW Theater. And so I'm just wondering if I just like to bring that up about that possibility. Observations were made of people tossing a lot of the cups and the waste there, and just wondering if you've thought about reusable cups, and branding of that. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Mayor, and for that wonderful question, Representative Cumbie. So Todd brought that to my attention, and as we were leaning into the conversation, private industry came to the table and said, we got it, right? We want to do this, right? So this summer, I'll just give you 2 examples, of which there will be more. Misty at Chalk and Cheese has a very beautiful branded wine glass that's a tumbler and it's reusable, and she's going to sell those, so you can go in and purchase one and get your first glass of wine with that purchase, and then every time you bring it back in, you'll get $1 off your pour. And so she's taken that up. And then Coal Creek also has developed their own to-go cup with a similar initiative to get customers to be incentivized to bring those back time and time again. So private business stepped up and did that, and I'm happy to support them.
Please go right ahead.
Will you be talking to some of the other restaurants, bars, etc. downtown, and letting them know that that is happening, and possibly even facilitating they're making connections with the supplier of the cups?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm not done with my rounds. We're also approaching our restaurants about a flavor festival, sort of a restaurant week that we're looking at doing with the international students on campus. So as we're out and about having those conversations, that friendly reminder of, if you're interested here, and we have local providers who can brand these mugs, which is great. So yes, I'm not done with that conversation, but I appreciate you bringing it up as a friendly reminder.
Other questions for Laramie Main Street Partner Agency Director? I just have a quick one. Oh, I saw a hand up. Was that you, Councilor Gabriel?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Trey, just curious, can you tell council how you weaved your Main Street Director into your state legislative experience, how that all worked out?
A brutal question from Councilor Gabriel.
Oh, well, Mayor, members of council, it was a unexpectedly beautiful experience for me. So one, I have to give a shout out to my staff and to my board. I stepped away for about a month. I did unpaid leave so that I could move to Cheyenne and serve, and stayed over in Cheyenne. I got an apartment in downtown, so I got that experience, and used that extra time instead of driving to read or sleep or, whatever I needed to do. And so I just feel very fortunate to be part of an organization that was willing to cover my duties and to make sure that we didn't drop any balls while I was gone. So feel very fortunate about that, and excited to go back in July again, and while we're having conversations about the American Rescue Plan funds, and make sure that we're using those strategically to make investments in our communities. So happy to have coffee with you guys and wear the other hat and talk it through, but I really enjoyed the experience and look forward to continuing to serve the community in this new role.
Good. That's great. Great to hear. Thank you.
A question well navigated. And I want to emphasize that that question did create an opportunity to address an issue that comes up. I've been kicking around in public service in Laramie long enough to know that people do ask questions like, do people collect a salary from their previous position if they have a public sector related job when they go over and serve in the legislature? And I appreciate your addressing that. And the fact that you took an unpaid leave to engage in that public service as a citizen legislator. And I think that's important to note because it's one of those things that people pay attention to. Other questions for Director Sherwood? I did have one that I wanted addressed, and you certainly touched on it a couple of times throughout the presentation, but I wonder if you could sort of just give us an overall assessment with regard to the Hollyhock Commons and the open container. Is it your impression with the level of contact you have with our downtown business folks and their customers also, I think it's worth mentioning, that was it your overall impression that that was a well-received program in general, and that people would like to see some version of that continue on in the future, when we're not necessarily motivated by public health concerns, but motivated more by trying to create opportunities for downtown?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, I know that these conversations have been complex, and I think it's really important to answer this from that perspective of a consumer. And so whether it's a traditional shopper or it's a business owner commenting on a consumer, I think you hit that nail on the head, that commentary has been very positive. And even this week, because Open Container starts Thursday, I've had people come up to me on the street, unsolicited, telling me that they are so excited to see this initiative come back, and that they love the, what was the word she used today? Just that it's like a stroll, right? So it's not a bar scene. It's not a late night rave. It's just this very, like, you're there to stroll, to visit with your friends, your neighbors, to like leisurely hang out in and out of businesses. And so I've heard a lot of just, thank you for giving us an opportunity to come downtown, spend a few hours, not having to have a specific destination in mind, but know that we can sit outside and chat. We can get up and walk around, window shop with the businesses. So that's the kind of feedback I'm hearing is just a gratitude for creative use of space, a recognition of public space being there for all members of the public, not just one set of users, and a graciousness or thankfulness around willing to try this again as we come out of this, crazy 2020.
I appreciate that, and I don't mean to belabor that and continuously return to that, but it's important for the council to be really in tune to all the feedback we get about that, positive and negative, because we need to use that to evaluate our choices about creating opportunities like that, and weighing where the balance of community input and reception to those programs is. So I appreciate another opportunity to talk about it. Other questions from council before I see if there's anyone from attendees this evening? Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Trey, I just wanted to, this is a comment, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm a little off script here, but I just wanted to note that I thought it was really great to see that 15-year comparison between, 2005 downtown Laramie and 2020 Laramie. I think that really makes quite the case for your organization. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you for sharing that slide specifically.
Thank you.
No problem about the comments. Well timed. Okay, let's see if there's a comment from attendees this evening about anything they've heard or questions they might have. Don't see any hands up. I don't see the assistant city manager indicating that he's heard from anybody. So we'll close this work session out. The city clerk's returned, which makes us happy. And I don't see any questions, and I think it's probably time to move on in our work session and close the work session out. Thank you very much for being here and answering those questions. And we look forward to future conversations about all of these projects that are happening. All right. Council members, we have on the agenda next the agenda review. So why don't we all take just a moment. Oh, no, we've got something before that, which is council updates. So why don't we get into council updates, and whoever's ready. I was counting on Councilmember Gabriel, and there he is, and then we'll go to Councilmember Harrington. Councilmember Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the Albany County Tourism Board meeting last week, and as Brad talked about, they're planning on moving into the location on South 3rd mid to late June, and they are really looking forward to a better location instead of 2nd and Custer. So I think that's going to be really a positive for them. They are not going to be manning and staffing, I guess is the better word, staffing the location of the summit. They decided that it's not in their best interest to do that. It's a lease agreement between YDOT, and they just didn't think it was a good idea. So I'm not sure what's going to happen to that. They haven't done that. I think this will be the second year in a row. They haven't staffed the visitor center on the summit. So with that, also there's a couple of members on the tourism board that will have terms expiring after the June meeting. One city and one county. Brad Jackson is a city appointment. He has served his maximum 2 terms, as has Kathleen Berticelli for the county. So city will have 1 new member to appoint in July. And I believe, Mayor, that is it.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. I have a question for you that you may not have an answer to, but you might. The tourism board has been leasing that Second and Custer location for these many years. Is that correct?
Renting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that could be a good location for different things, and maybe not necessarily the tourism board, but we wouldn't have any indication of what might come next because they were renting it out. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Dieter Sturm is the owner, I believe. And so they were renting that from Dieter for many years now. And they just think that South Third location is going to be much better for their organization.
There'll probably be another agency or business that will come along that might be able to make use of that spot. It's a good downtown spot, but I can see the need for a different spot for the tourism board. Thanks for the updates, Councilmember Gabriel. Councilmember Harrington, you're next, and then I'm looking for whoever wants to go after that. Go ahead, Councilmember Harrington, and then I saw the hand.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Planning Commission met last night. They approved an alternative front lot line for a house at 2305 Spring Creek. That just is moving what is designated as the front of their house to the other around the corner, basically. So they can build a different fence, different size fence. And then they approved to recommend the vacation of Lewis Street from 11th to 12th and the alley within that to the university. They recommended approval of that as well. They had 1 vacancy on the Planning Commission. I'm trying to get those interviews set up for the end of the week so we can have that coming soon. And then last night they accepted a resignation of a second member. So we will be doing another round of interviews for the Planning Commission as well. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. It'll be
Mr. Mayor, I should update one more thing. I'm sorry to interrupt. I serve on the Pilot Hill committee as well. They are working on getting a top to bottom trail completed this summer. So keep an eye out for that. And they've been really working on with the city, Todd specifically on trying to figure out access. And it looks like primary access to Pilot Hill will likely be on that Willett Street, the sort of like eastern edge of Willett. That will likely be the primary access for Pilot Hill moving forward to sort of take pressure off that 45th and Crow intersection. And then Boulder Drive is just not a big enough street to accommodate it at this point. So sorry to hop in with that, but I thought it was probably a useful update for the rest of council.
Yeah, no apology necessary. Definitely good information for us, good update for us. And we appreciate it. Councilmember Cumby, I had you next, and then I'm looking for hands up after that. I've got you.
Regarding the Disabilities Commission, we are continuing with our planning for participating in Pride Fest, and that's being held June 26th, the last Saturday in June at Washington Park. And Assistant City Manager Freezer has been extremely helpful in coordinating some of the details about setting up the obstacle course on the basketball court during the Pride Fest celebration. We'll be doing setup at 11, and we're reaching out for volunteers to help with the unloading and setup. And we start that at 11, and I forget what time it finishes, but that's all in process, and we're real excited to be participating in that. And the second report is on the Board of Health, and we had our meeting last week with the full board, and it was a very good meeting, interesting, diverse group of people. Our two main topics was to look at the rules and regulations that were written in 2016, and our plan is to begin to review and update some of that. And then our second major discussion was about expanding some of the scope and activities of the board. And we're having conversation about other determinants of public health and how we might coordinate with the Department of Public Health and what would be appropriate for the city to engage in. And so those conversations are going on among the Board of Health and staff, and we'll continue to work on that. So that is it for my report. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councilor Schuster, and then I'll go to Councilor O'Doherty.
Thank you very much. Not much going on in my area. The Wyoming Territorial Park has had a few little get-togethers. A lot of schools are coming in for tours. They always schedule their meeting for the last Monday in the month. They forgot that the last Monday of this month is Memorial Day. So it looks like we're going to schedule probably that meeting 1 month later. Historical Railroad Depot has several gatherings coming. Now they are finally done with people canceling their reservations, and now they're opening to some weddings. And as you saw, Trey said this Thursday, DDA is going to have an event there. Also a board member, not the liaison for the rifle range. We had a national shooting competition about 10 days ago. It went very smooth, very well. Had a lot of people from, I think, about 15 different states come and try out ours on a terrible weather day. We love our weather, I know that. And also we have some certification classes out there, and we have now a women's group that is now wanting to form out there, and they're doing a lot of classes out there. So all the other meetings that people are having are during the workday, and I have a terrible time trying to get out to them because we're very short-handed where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Schuster. I've got a couple of questions for you. One is, where the heck did they find the ammo to have a shooting competition? Tremendous shortage, and nobody can get anything, so that's amazing to me. I'm glad you don't have to answer that question. Here's a question.
To provide their own. Most competitive marksmen load their own, so they have to bring their own. We do not provide any ammo at all, zero out there.
I just, I know it's an issue right now, and it's one of those things that comes and goes. I saw, Councilor Schuster, in the newspaper that the Union Pacific is going to run the big boy again this summer. I imagine that'll pass through Laramie. Has the railroad board had a chance to talk about what they might do for an event for that?
Yes.
So they'll have something put together for that later on this, towards the end of the summer, I think is what I read.
If they stop, we have their schedule isn't in stone yet, and it's really nice when they stop for fuel and water, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just, it will be passing through between these hours of the day, and people usually go down city. We hope they stop so that people can see it through the fence, but There's no guarantees in writing yet. If there's a schedule, I will sure pass it on.
I appreciate that. People really, really like that event when it happens, and so keep us posted. If there's anything we can do to help encourage some kind of a stop, obviously, I think we probably want to try to do that. Thank you. Councilmember O'Doherty, you're up.
So we had interviews for another traffic commission member, so we'll at least have a quorum if you all vote to approve. And Councilor Harrington and I and our city clerk and an HR person, Jasmine, had interviews with youth council today, and we have more tomorrow. And I have to say, we look like we're in great shape for youth council. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Appreciate the update, and it's good to hear about the youth council. I know we had some applications coming in, and I think that closed back on the 14th. So looking forward to it. Who's up next? Okay. I don't see any hands up. I'll give you all just a quick one about the Juvenile Justice Service Board, which is in a little bit of transition right now because that's headed by the county attorney. We're going to have a couple of meetings to sort of figure out where we go from here with the new individual in the office and how the new county attorney wishes to proceed. And when I know more about that, I will let you know. We're going to have a couple of I guess I'd call them organizational meetings to figure out what the next steps are. And I'll update you when I have something about your Juvenile Justice Services Board. When I know something, you'll know it. Councilmember Gabriel.
Mayor, just curious, we always have the Laramie Regional Airport as one of our community partner updates. Do you know why that was not the case tonight?
You bet. Councilmember Gabriel, my understanding is they're in the middle of staff transition there. And so wrestling with, the natural challenges of getting a new staff together and getting everything handled, they had requested a delay in their presentation. And all that we require through the contract for services is an annual report. So I think the understanding was that it would be perfectly acceptable to bump that out a little bit and provide them with another opportunity down the road. So we'll hear from them soon. And I'd give it over to Councilor Stalder if she wants to throw anything on top of that.
You hit the nail on the head, and we are having a meeting tomorrow to kind of discuss that going forward and what that'll look like. So that's why I don't have any updates this time around. That's excellent.
Makes sense. And of course, we also had the presentation from the Chamber Business Alliance tonight. So I think we're up to date there. Thank you, Councilor Stalder. So, Councilor Gabriel, it's forthcoming. It'll be soon. They just needed a little time. Anyone else want to add any updates or comments before we do agenda review? I really appreciate these updates, guys. It helps us keep a little bit of a finger on the pulse of the other things that are going on. But if there aren't any further comments or updates, why don't we take a look at that agenda and then just go through that with any questions you might have. Pretty straightforward agenda with a lot of carryover items from previous meetings.
Like the agenda.
Yeah, I think we should be able to tackle that one and move through it pretty well. Okay, if there aren't any questions or comments for agenda review, we'll go over to public comment now. For it, anyone that wants to make a public comment on an unrelated topic this evening, and I'm looking for hands in the attendees group. I don't see any hands up. So, giving that just a second, the city clerk hasn't heard from anyone either. that's the case, I'm going to adjourn our work session. And then, council members, we have a need tonight to convene a special meeting. And we need to go through the procedure. And so I'm going to close the work session for May 25th, 2021, and convene a special meeting of the City Council for May 25th, 2021. I'll turn it over to the City Clerk for the announcement.
Notice is hereby given that a special meeting of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, May 25th, 2021, after the work session at 6:00 p.m. via Zoom webinar ID number 857-2437-7818, passcode 958231, from City Hall Council Chambers, 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming, for the following purpose: to adjourn to executive session regarding litigation, Wyoming Statute 16-4-405A, Roman numeral 3.
Thank you, City Clerk. City Council members and attendees, you've heard the announcement and the purpose, and I'm going to recognize Council Member Schuster now for the motion.
Okay, thank you. I move that the council adjourn to executive session regarding litigation, Wyoming State Statute 16-4-405, small letter A, Roman numeral 3.
Second.
Motion and a second from the Vice Mayor. All those in favor say aye or indicate by raising your hand or both.
Aye.
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 We'll adjourn to executive session. We'll see you all shortly.